All right, let's dive deep into Nathaniel Branden's The Power of Self-Esteem.
Really focusing on the practical and psychological stuff today.
Yeah, perfect for our listeners who want the good stuff quickly, right?
Absolutely. No time wasted.
And this book, it's fascinating how Branden takes self-esteem. I mean, it's not just about feeling good, is it?
No, not at all. It's like the base for how we think and act, like really deep stuff.
I love that. So much more than just a self-help cliche, right?
Totally.
So, to get started, let's talk about, well, what self-esteem really is. It's one of those terms everyone uses, but...
But they all mean something different.
Exactly.
You've got William James, like the OG psychologist. He saw it as like a scorecard almost. Success is measured up against your goals.
Oof, always comparing ourselves, huh? That's gotta be tough.
Yeah, tough and potentially disappointing, right?
Definitely.
Then there's Stanley Cooper Smith. He focused on feeling loved by people close to you, feeling accepted.
Okay, so that's a little warmer.
Yeah, but Branden goes deeper.
Okay, all right.
He defines self-esteem as, hold on, let me get this right, the disposition to experience oneself as competent to cope with the challenges of life and as deserving of happiness.
So not just feeling good, but like actually feeling capable and deserving.
Exactly.
See, it's
all about
our link to reality, like our ability to think and act in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling of deserving happiness, like it's a given, Not because someone gave it to us.
Powerful stuff.
It is.
But let's talk practicality. Why should we care about self-esteem? How does it actually affect our lives?
Well, think of it like the base for everything we do. Self-esteem impacts our decisions, how we set goals, how we deal with hard times, even relationships.
It's not just internal, it really spills over into the real world.
Absolutely. And Branden uses this example, right? This company leader, super successful on paper, but totally unhappy.
What went wrong?
Well, he built his career on, like, his parents' expectations, not what he was into,
So he had the success,
And
but...
it wasn't his success. Skills and drive can only take you so far. I see that. It's about aligning your actions with what you believe in, right?
Exactly. Otherwise, even the achievements, they can feel empty.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. How does self-esteem play into the modern workplace, Everything's changing so fast.
Yeah, it's all knowledge-based, super fast-paced, and that actually makes self-esteem even more important.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about the skills people need now. Innovation, directing yourself, being adaptable. All those need strong belief in your own abilities, right?
Yeah, you need to trust yourself.
Right, so people with higher self-esteem, they do better in this kind of environment.
They thrive in the chaos.
Yeah, they embrace challenges, take risks, bounce back easier.
They don't fear the unknown.
Exactly. They're not so scared to try new things or speak up.
I'm convinced I want what they have. So how do we develop self-esteem? I bet our listeners are dying to know.
Okay, well, Branden outlined 6 pillars. We'll get into those. But it's important to remember, this isn't an overnight thing. It's a process.
No shortcuts.
No magic affirmations, unfortunately.
Darn.
It comes from how we live, the choices we make, aligning actions with our values.
That's a whole way of being.
It really is.
All right, lay those pillars on me. What's the first one?
Living consciously. It's about being present, aware, reflecting on your experiences, truly trying to understand yourself and the world around you.
So the opposite of being on autopilot, just reacting all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Actively engaging with life, making choices on purpose, not just drifting.
I can already see how that's tied to self-esteem. The more aware you are, the better your choices are.
You got it. And that awareness leads right into the second pillar, self-responsibility.
Oh, here comes the tough love.
Taking ownership of your actions, even when things go wrong.
Oof, that's hard.
It is, but it's about acknowledging your role in your own life. Even in tough situations, we get to choose how we respond.
There's power in that.
There is. You're not a victim. You're the author,
I love that.
And that's a direct boost to self-esteem.
Awesome. What's next?
Integrity, third pillar. It's about walking the walk, matching your actions to your values.
So the opposite, hypocrisy, that's the enemy here.
You could say that. When we don't live by what we believe in, we chip away at our self-respect.
That makes sense?
Integrity is being true to yourself. That's what builds real self-esteem.
Okay, keep them coming. What's number 4?
Self-acceptance. This one can be tricky because it's not about liking everything about ourselves.
All have room for improvement. Right.
Exactly. Self-acceptance is about acknowledging where we are now, the starting point. Accepting yourself, flaws and all, that's the base for change.
I'm starting to see how these connect. It's like a chain reaction.
is.
Living consciously, taking responsibility, acting with integrity, those all make it easier to accept yourself.
You got it. And Branden has this example, this woman who couldn't say no to any guy, led to tons of self-loathing.
That's so sad. I can't imagine how that affected her self-esteem.
It was really damaging. But as she started accepting this part of herself, she actually felt calmer, even like more self-respect.
Really? So acceptance isn't giving up, it's the spark for change.
Exactly. When we stop fighting ourselves, that's when real transformation can happen.
2 more to go. Give me the next one.
Independent thinking. It's about evaluating information yourself, forming your own opinions, not just following the crowd.
So being your own person, trusting your gut.
Yeah, thinking for yourself even when it's hard or uncomfortable.
I can see how that builds confidence. You don't need anyone else to tell you what to think.
Absolutely. Independent thinking leads to self-reliance. Key part of healthy self-esteem.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. Hit me with it.
Purposeful living. Having a sense of direction, setting goals that matter to you, and going after them with everything you've got.
It's about feeling like your life has meaning, like you're working towards something that matters.
Exactly. Remember that company head who wasn't happy?
Yeah, what was his deal?
He had no real purpose. His goals weren't his own.
Like he was living someone else's life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even with all the success, he couldn't feel proud, you know? He wasn't following his own path.
What a reminder that success isn't just what's on the outside. It's got to be about something that really resonates with you personally.
You got it. Purposeful living means aligning what you do with what you value.
Okay, this is a lot to take in. What self-esteem is, why it matters, the 6 pillars, wow. Before we move on, I just want to make sure we're clear on one thing.
What's that?
The difference between like real self-esteem and what Branden calls pseudo-self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like a lot of people chase the wrong kind, you know?
Super important point. So many people try to get their worth from like popularity, things they own, social status.
And that's the pseudo stuff.
Yeah, it's like an illusion. It looks good from the outside, but can't handle any real pressure.
So fragile.
Totally dependent on external things, not a real sense of worth.
And it never lasts.
Never enough. That's why Branden stresses the 6 pillars, building that genuine self-esteem.
That comes from within, from knowing yourself.
You got it. And it's a journey. It's always evolving.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave everyone with a question to think about.
I like it. Go ahead.
If self-esteem is all about how we relate to reality and our ability to think and act, how much of that comes from our childhoods? You know, how much of our self-worth is shaped by those early experiences?
That's a fantastic question, and one we'll unpack more in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned.
That connection between childhood and self-esteem, it's huge, E. Branden actually says a lot of us, even if we didn't have like major trauma, we're still products of what he calls dysfunctional families.
Whoa, strong words. What does that even mean?
He's talking about those subtle things, you know, the way our environment early on, it shapes our self-esteem. Like, think about it. How many of us had parents who, I don't know, maybe they denied reality sometimes or sent mixed messages or just brushed off our feelings?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I catch myself doing that, like telling my kids to calm down when they're upset.
And it comes from a good place, right? But those little things, they can teach kids that their feelings aren't important, you know? Makes them doubt themselves.
So even with good intentions, we might have absorbed some bad messages about our worth.
Absolutely. Our parents, they were doing their best with what they had, right?
It's like a cycle that keeps repeating.
Exactly. That's why self-awareness is so important. Got to recognize how the past affects us and know W, and then make choices to break free.
So if someone's listening and they realize, hey, I do have these negative messages stuck in me, what can they do about it? Like, how do they heal and build better self-esteem?
That's where the 6 pillars come in. It's all about how we live, the choices we make, aligning our actions with what we believe in, choosing to act in ways that build self-respect.
So not blaming mom and dad, but taking charge in W.
Exactly. We have the power to choose differently, challenge those old beliefs, write a new story for ourselves.
That's pretty hopeful, right? We're not doomed to repeat everything.
Not at all. And it goes back to self-acceptance, remember. Not saying bad behavior is okay, but acknowledging where we are, the good and the bad, with kindness.
Because if we're constantly beating ourselves up,
That's the opposite of self-esteem.
makes sense. But how do we actually do self-acceptance? It's one thing to get it, but another to live it.
It's a process, for sure. Start with awareness. Notice that inner critic, the negative talk, and just challenge it gently.
Like, be a kind observer of your own mind.
Yeah, don't criticize. Be curious. Ask yourself, where did this belief come from? Is it even true? Is it helping me at all?
Turning judgment into understanding.
Exactly. And as you get to the root of those beliefs, then you can start to swap them out for something better.
This is deep work.
It is, but it builds that inner trust, that self-respect, which is all part of self-esteem.
Okay, so we talked about childhood self-acceptance, but how does all this tie back to that feeling of like being effective in the world? That's what Branden talked about, right?
Great point. His definition of self-esteem, it's about feeling competent, able to handle life's challenges.
Not just feeling good, but feeling capable.
Exactly. And that feeling, it's all about our relationship with reality, trusting ourselves to think, to learn, to make good choices.
It's okay to make mistakes, we just got to learn from them.
Exactly. And that's where his idea of the will to be efficacious comes in.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. Tell me more.
It's about not letting those moments where we feel helpless, like, define us. Knowing we're bigger than our problems, that we have the strength to get through them.
Like an inner well of resilience we can draw from.
And we can build that up by having a growth mindset, seeing challenges as chances to learn.
Not pretending everything's perfect, but facing the tough stuff with courage.
Exactly. And that's where living consciously comes back in. Being aware of what's going on inside, making choices that line up with what we want.
Becoming the boss of our own lives.
I like that. It's about ownership, responsibility, and making choices that are truly good for us.
So self-acceptance, this will to be effective, living consciously, anything else that helps build this feeling of competence.
For sure. Remember independent thinking. Evaluating information, forming your own opinions, not being scared to question things.
Trusting your gut, even when it's not popular.
Exactly. Thinking for yourself even when it's risky.
That takes confidence.
It does. And it leads to self-reliance, which is part of feeling competent in the world.
We've covered so much, but before we wrap up this part, there's one thing I think a lot of people get stuck on.
What is it?
The whole deserving happiness thing. In my head, I get it, but emotionally, it's hard to believe I deserve good things, you know? Especially with those old messages from childhood.
That's common, and it's at the heart of Branden's idea. Self-esteem, it's both feeling competent and deserving happiness.
So not just what we can do, but what we're allowed to receive.
Exactly. It's about self-respect, having a good attitude towards our right to live and be happy.
Not being selfish, but knowing that we're inherently worthy just because we exist.
You got it. And for people who are taught they got to earn love, earn happiness, that's a huge E-shift.
Unlearning those old patterns.
Totally. And that's where self-compassion comes in. Treat yourself like you'd treat someone you love. Accept your imperfections, knowing you're worthy no matter what.
Giving ourselves permission to be, like, perfectly imperfect.
Yes. That's powerful stuff against those feelings of not good enough that hold us back.
Okay, so we have self-respect, self-compassion. Those help us feel deserving of happiness. Anything else Branden talks about that's important here?
One of the coolest things he connects it to is integrity. One of the 6 pillars, remember?
We mentioned it, but let's go deeper. What's the link?
Branden says integrity is essential for good self-esteem because it's about walking the walk, aligning your actions with your beliefs.
So being authentic, living by your own moral code.
Exactly. When what we do goes against what we believe, we lose respect for ourselves. Like, we're not being real.
It's hard to feel good about yourself if you're not living honestly.
And that's why he says it's so important to figure out your core values and then make choices that support them.
Not just following rules, but figuring out what matters to you.
You got it. It's a journey of self-discovery. What do I believe? What kind of person do I want to be?
Those are big questions, but important ones.
And as you live with more integrity, you naturally feel better about yourself, which boosts your self-esteem.
So integrity is part of feeling good, A&D, creating a life that's meaningful.
Absolutely. And that leads to another point Branden makes about self-esteem and pride. He's careful to separate, like, real pride from arrogance, you know, the kind that comes from insecurity.
That interesting. Tell me more.
He sees true pride as the reward for achievement. That feeling of, like, I did that because of your actions, not to impress anyone else.
It's an internal satisfaction, not about showing off.
Exactly. Recognizing your efforts, celebrating your wins, no matter how big or small.
That could really keep you going, right? If you let yourself feel proud.
For sure. And he stresses choosing goals that are lined up with your values, things that really matter to you. Like, he tells this story about this company head, super successful, but miserable.
That was his problem. Was he not good at a job?
He was talented, driven, but he picked that career for his parents, not himself.
Living someone else's dream.
Exactly. So even with all the success, he couldn't feel real pride. He was off track.
Reminds us that real success isn't just the stuff you achieve. It's got to come from the right place.
Couldn't have said it better. And this leads to another key point. Self-esteem, it's not fixed. It's not like you either have it or you don't.
It can change.
Absolutely. It's a process, always developing. It's a journey, not a destination. It's about constantly choosing to live consciously, responsibly, with integrity.
So no matter what, we can always work on our self-esteem.
Exactly. And those 6 pillars, they're like a map to get there.
Okay, we covered a lot about the practical side of self-esteem, the psychology behind it. But before we wrap up this part, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question.
Go for it. I'm listening.
If self-esteem is truly this important for our mental well-being, like Branden says, what does that mean for society as a whole? What if everyone had good self-esteem? What would that world look like?
Whoa. That's an amazing question to think about, and one we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Yeah, that's a big question to end on, the impact of self-esteem on society. It's like central to Branden's whole thing, you know?
Yeah.
He didn't just see it as personal, but like vital for everyone.
It's almost like a healthy society needs healthy individuals, at least in terms of self-esteem.
Exactly. He argues that self-esteem, it's the base for a more just, compassionate, and successful world. That's a pretty bold statement. So how does my self-esteem make society better?
Think about the stuff Branden links to good self-esteem. Rationality, responsibility, integrity, being assertive, knowing your
It
purpose.
sounds like we could use a little more of that these days, huh?
Right. Imagine a world where those were the norm,
Yeah.
people thinking critically, taking ownership, treating each other right, going after their goals with, like, passion, ethics.
That's like a perfect world almost. Is that even possible?
Branden thought so. He saw self-esteem as a skill, something you can learn and improve both personally and as a whole society.
So it's not about hoping for the best. It's about actually doing things that build self-esteem.
Exactly. And it all starts with awareness, recognizing how big of a deal self-esteem is in our relationships, our work, our communities, even politics.
It's bigger than just me then.
Way bigger. Branden said this awareness needs to be everywhere. Families, schools, workplaces, the whole system.
So practically speaking, what can we do to promote self-esteem on that large scale?
Education is huge. Teaching kids about self-esteem, building that sense of worth early on.
Creating environments where they feel safe, loved, respected, where they can be themselves, think for themselves, make their own choices.
Exactly. And we can do the same thing in workplaces. Creating a culture that values people, encourages open communication, gives employees freedom and responsibility.
Sounds like everybody wins. Happier workers and a more productive environment.
That's the goal. And on a bigger level, societal level, it's about policies that empower people, create opportunity, fairness, and encourage both personal responsibility and being active citizens.
So making a world where people feel valued, respected, and like they can make a difference.
Exactly. Branden truly believed this was possible and essential for the future.
It's inspiring, right? Self-esteem isn't just about feeling good. It's about making the world better for us, any future generations.
You said it perfectly. It's about recognizing that we're all connected, that each person's well-being matters for the whole.
This has been an amazing deep dive. We've talked about what self-esteem is, how it affects us, Branden's 6 pillars, even how it ripples out to society.
And I hope our listeners now understand the power of self-esteem, how it can transform their lives and the world around them.
Couldn't agree more. And to wrap things up, I want to leave you with one last thought from Branden. Self-esteem is the reputation we acquire with ourselves. So ask yourself, what kind of reputation are you building? What choices will you make today that shape your self-esteem tomorrow?
That's worth thinking about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the power of self-esteem. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in yourself.
And remember, you deserve happiness.